Hey yogis, Shan here. Happy Just the Tip Tuesday. I should have screamed at the end of that like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone. Because that's kind of how I feel about teaching this pose. Padmasana, that's our peak pose this week. Lotus pose, and this is in service to Saraswati, who is the goddess of the arts, and she's absolutely stunning, and she sits on a lotus. So we're honoring the goddess Saraswati with this pose. So with that said, this posture is fairly inaccessible to a lot of people, and poses like handstand or arm balances, if we do enough strengthening, stability work, the pose might materialize for us. But for this, it may be a lifelong pursuit, depending on your knee joints, depending on your hip joints. So we're going to explore that. But I think remembering always that the pose, the fullest expression of the pose is never the point. It's the practice, it's the journey. It's knowing your edge, flirting with your edge, knowing when to pull back from your edge. And so I actually have a ton of pain doing this pose, so I can't do the full pose anymore. And that's really been a practice of ego for me, to let it go, that it doesn't matter, that's not the point. And really, if you're in that place, which a lot of people, this is a very difficult posture, that might be where you're at. And so working through the mental stuff is just as much, if not more, the practice than, nailing Padmasana. So we're gonna start in Sukhasana, or easy seated pose. And already, if in Sukhasana, so you can see as I'm sitting here, my knee joints are at about the level of my hip joints. My right knee is my right hip is much more flexible than my left. So you can see there's some space underneath my left and not really any space underneath my right. I'm gonna change the cross of my legs. When I do it on this side, I instantly actually have pain in my left knee, and I still am having trouble getting the knee down because the right leg's in front. That's also why there's space. But I'm having trouble getting the knee down and already feeling pain. So if you are in that camp, Sukhasana is where you're at. You might even prop up your knees with blocks to give yourself some stability. Or the other great thing you can do is work with a blanket, a bolster, a block, lifting your hips to help the anterior tilt of the pelvis. Okay, so this is a big part of this hip mobility, is being able to slightly tip our pelvis into an anterior tilt instead of what's called a posterior tilt, or rounding in our pelvis, okay? So you can see the shape changes as I move my pelvis. So as I move my hips into an anterior tilt, I'm able to more comfortably come into this pose. Let me test it out on the left side. Yeah, I'm still feeling pain, but it's a little bit more accessible. So maybe you work in Sukhasana. If that's happening for you, we might build to Agni Stambhasana, or fire log pose. So I'm going to start with my good leg and trying to get that knee over on top of the foot, or stacking. If you notice, as I take the leg out in the more commonly instructed, ankle over knee, my knee naturally goes up. So one, I have tight hips. Two, part of this is just how my hip joint functions, but for the most part, it's just that I have tight hips. So I can hang out here, and this could be my work for Padmasana. The third option is to take a half lotus. I know I can do it on my right side, so I'm going to show it to you on this side. I'm going to point my toes. This is so important. If you take nothing else away, listen to this next point. As I take my leg out, I'm going to close the knee joint before trying to come into the pose. So a lot of times people will pick their leg up and scoop it into the shape, and that's where we're going to tear a meniscus or bring injury to the knee. So I'm going to keep the knee joint slightly open as I take it out to the side, then close the knee joint, and then from the hip, so my knee is no longer having to do any of the work, I'm going to cross that foot over and lower my right knee. So this half variation, my left foot is catching my right knee. If I want to progress a little bit more, I'm going to take my left foot out, lower my right knee to the ground. You'll notice this foot up here is active, and I'm really feeling this in my hip. It's a great stretch, no pain in my knee. If your knee is way up here, but you could get the foot to the hip, go back to Agni Stambhasana. I'm going to show you how to exit in a minute, because this is still putting a lot of pressure on the knee, even if you slide a prop under it. I used to teach it like that all the time, but but it still can be fairly injurious. So to come out, I'm gonna pick my knee up. I'm going to slide my leg out, keeping that knee joint closed. Then I'm gonna extend the leg and shake it out, okay? If I were to go to the full pose, then this foot, I would do the same thing. I would close the knee joint, I would pick it up, and I would slide that foot across, and actually it doesn't feel too bad. I'm unable to get my foot all the way up here, because when I fully close this knee joint is when I have a lot of pain. But you can already see my left knee is lifted up. When I tip my pelvis, I get a little bit more stability there, but I'm starting to feel some sensation in my knee. So I would go ahead and keep the knee closed, bring the foot out, and return to this half variation. Okay, so Padmasana is a really beautiful pose. It's in a ton of other postures as you progress your physical practice. However, it can be super injurious, and if you have tight hips, which, you know, if a yoga teacher at the beginning of the class is like, what do you want to work on today? 9 times out of 10, we're going to hear hips, and 9 times out of 10, people want to do pigeon, and 9 times out of 10, everybody's little baby eyes are weeping. That's because they have tight hips, weak knees, and so that combination is not ideal for this pose. So please, please, please practice safely. You only get 1 set of knees, and then if you get new ones, they're plastic or something. So honor your knees, honor your limits, listen to your body. If it's there for you, congratulations. And if it's not, work through what comes up with that. I hope you enjoy practicing with us this week in honor of Saraswati and working on Padmasana. That's it.